ex-hospital worker tries to euthanize my grandfather. Around 5 years ago, when I was 17, my grandfather died, and his last months were rough on the entire family. My grandfather, Jim, had advanced brain cancer, but he spent most of his time at home under hospice care. One afternoon, about 2 weeks before he passed, I was alone with my grandpa, waiting for the hospice nurse to come check in on him. A man who I had never seen before knocked on the door. He was wearing hospital scrubs, but he hadn't brought any equipment with him, which was odd. I asked him if he worked for the hospital, and he nodded and introduced himself. This guy told me his name is Dave, and he said this was his first shift with Jim. He then proceeded to tell me that he looked over my grandfather's file and that he wanted to speak to whichever family member had the legal authority to pull the plug. My grandfather wasn't even on life support, so I assumed Dave was just using plug as an expression. I live in a right to die state where euthanasia is legal, so it's not like the option had never occurred to us, but as far as I know, no member of our family had ever expressed an openness to euthanizing him. I told him that I had no authority to make that decision, and that my grandfather, who was now delirious and unable to consent to much of anything, had specifically said to prolong his life indefinitely unless he was crying out in extreme pain, which he wasn't. Dave put his hand on my shoulder as though he were consoling me, and he talks about how old people become burdens that their families need to let go of. Then, Dave pulled a bottle of pills out of his pocket and told me that they were barbiturates that would trigger a peaceful death. He said the coroner would determine that Jim died naturally from his cancer. I started to panic, and I firmly told him that under no circumstance would we be euthanizing Jim at this time. He appeared to ignore me, and then he started to untwist the bottle as he made his way towards my grandfather's bed. I tried to wrestle the pills from his hand, and he seemed startled. He played innocent and said, "I only wanted to show your grandpa Jim here the pills." Dave knew perfectly well that my grandfather had almost no idea what was going on. I called 911 and hastily explained the situation to the dispatcher. Dave suddenly became very scared and bolted out of the house. The cops arrived within 5 minutes, while my grandfather's actual hospice nurse arrived a few minutes after that. Based on my physical description, the police and hospital staff were able to identify Dave as a recently fired hospital orderly. Based on my testimony, Dave was charged with making a criminal threat, but unfortunately, he was acquitted. Unsettling car ride. Okay, so I just had a really unsettling Uber trip. I was waiting outside my pickup location around 10 p.m. The pickup location was in a relatively quiet area outside my local gym. The app showed that my Uber driver was there, but the car was nowhere to be found. There was a car that had pulled up as I was coming outside, but it was neither the make, model, or the color of my car, so I ignored it. That car sat there for about 8 minutes before driving away. A few seconds later, our Uber pulled up. It was the same make and model, but a different color than what the app had showed. At the time, I was with my boyfriend and I was cold and antsy to get home, so I ignored that and went to get in the car. The driver had 2 full-size baby seats in the back of the vehicle, so my boyfriend sat in the front, and the driver had to put 1 seat in the trunk so I could sit in the back. The car was messy and had food like crackers everywhere, but that was besides the point. Once we were in the car, the driver asked where we were going. This is when I started to really question things, because every other Uber I've taken, they have my drop-off location from the app. He said something along the lines of, "My app hasn't started yet." So my boyfriend just started giving him directions. We were only about a 10-minute drive away from home. We get onto a street adjacent to ours, and my boyfriend tells him, "Okay, it's not this left, but the next one." And then, as we get closer, he tells him, "Take this left coming up." And the driver just keeps going, right past our street. My boyfriend looks back at me with this expression on his face like, "What the fuck is going on?" and says to the driver, "Oh, that was our turn back there." And we only get silence in return. My boyfriend says, hello?" Still only receiving silence. My boyfriend said, "Pull over here. This is good." The driver didn't say anything and kept driving for a few more seconds before pulling over. He apologized and let us out. I looked at the app to end the trip, as we were a few streets over from our drop-off location, and the trip had not even been started. It still said meet your driver at the pickup location, so I canceled the trip and looked at the profile photo, and I don't even think it was the same guy. My boyfriend said that when he was telling the driver he missed our turn, he had this really creepy smile on his face, and it freaked him out. I genuinely believe he was contemplating kidnapping us.